Hello, I hope you are doing well. My name is Jaclyn Veno from GOSO Learning Solutions, and welcome to the Genuine Learning blog. Today, we're going to cover a very interesting topic, which is a COSO report that shares how generative AI will impact internal controls. We have a lot to cover during this blog, so with that being said, let's go ahead and get started. COSO's report is titled Achieving Effective Internal Control Over Generative AI, and it was issued on February 23rd of this year. This release builds on the COSO framework, and it gives organizations a really practical way to think about the risks and controls that come with using generative AI, which we all know is something that is pretty commonly used at the workplace in this point in time. COSO's message is not that we need to do a huge overhaul and come up with a brand new framework, but really that the existing internal control components and principles can be adapted to include GenAI. The report keeps the familiar 5 components of COSO. It keeps the same 17 principles from the framework that we all know and love, and then translates those into GenAI specific practices. So in my opinion, I think this guidance is very practical for organizations that want to govern their AI without having to recreate the wheel and completely start from scratch. Now, a common theme in this report is that although GenAI brings a lot of valuable speed and efficiency to organizations, we all know that it is just not without its own risks. The report highlights several major GenAI risks, including things like cybersecurity risks, hallucinations, prompt injection, opaque reasoning, and also rapid configuration changes. It also does point out some additional risks as well, particularly involving data quality, privacy, bias in the model, and also third-party vendors, and also governance gaps that can occur when using AI outside of regular IT oversight. So in essence, the main concern here is that GenAI can definitely be a powerful ally, but if it is poorly governed and if it lacks proper oversight and if we don't have any internal controls in use of this, lots of small issues can definitely spread quickly and it can eventually have overarching implications, things that are going to impact reporting, potentially compliance, maybe even operational decisions. So in essence, a lot can go wrong and it can definitely escalate very quickly if we don't have proper oversight over GenAI. In addition to walking through the different risks, the report also details the foundational characteristics that we want to consider when we're trying to think about GenAI controls. COSO says that GenAI is probabilistic, not deterministic, which basically means that its output should be treated as claims that we need to validate, right? We don't want to take everything it says as fact and kind of accept it automatically at face value. We're going to have to make sure that what it says is actually true and do our job and kind of hold up our end of things. It's also very dynamic. It's easy to scale. So changes in prompts, models, or data can quickly change the output and also the risk profile. Another important point is that GenAI has a very low barrier to entry. So organizations need to have clear rules around who can build, who can deploy, and also who can just basically use the GenAI. At the same time, GenAI can also help govern AI through monitoring, validation, and pattern detection as well. So with all that being said, considering the risks, considering some of the characteristics of GenAI, what is really the main point of this report? It is basically to show how COSO's 5 existing components can be applied to GenAI in a practical way. So the report walks through the things that we know and love. It walks through the control environment, risk assessment, control activities, information and communication, and monitoring activities, all through the lens of using GenAI. It also organizes GenAI into 8 capability types, so organizations can see where risks begin and how they can flow throughout this process. That capability first view is especially helpful because different GenAI is going to create different control needs, and that definitely goes without saying. COSO also provides a roadmap for putting this guidance into practice. The steps are to establish governance, do an inventory of GenAI use cases, assess risks by COSO component, design controls, implement and communicate those, and also monitor and adapt them over time. And the key idea here with this roadmap is that this is not simply a one and done project. This is a cycle, and this should repeat over and over again as technology and business priorities and risks evolve over time. That makes this roadmap very useful for ongoing governance, not just the initial implementation. And perhaps, in my opinion, one of the most useful features of this report is really the amount of practical detail that it includes. It has lots of examples, control ideas, implementation, guidance. It has case studies. It has a whole, 2 different appendices to look at. So it definitely goes beyond theory of just giving organizations concrete ways to, document controls, but it also has tons of examples, right? How to actually test these items, how to monitor these over time. So for me, the big takeaway here is that COSO is really encouraging organizations to use GenAI, but to do so appropriately, right? Have the discipline, have the transparency, have the accountability by creating some strong internal controls around these items. That is what makes this release so relevant and timely for auditors, controllers, business leaders. Just a very, very helpful report that I definitely enjoyed looking into and learning about for the purposes of this blog and to also implement into other GLS courses. And that is all we have for today, folks. I would say that probably the one simple takeaway here is that GenAI is not going anywhere, and it's also not outside the scope of internal controls. It is a new environment, and we can still take the same COSO components and principles and just apply those with a Gen AI lens to them. If this is a topic that you're interested in, we left a QR code here on the slide for you to explore some other GLS courses where we cover important topics like the COSO framework and internal controls. Once again, my name is Jaclyn Veno from GLOSO Learning Solutions. Thank you so much for tuning in to today's blog, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.